Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some serious science. We're tackling canine tumor immunotherapy today, and let me tell you, this stuff is cutting edge.
Definitely cutting edge. We're dissecting a deep dive from clinical cancer research, and they don't hold back.
Translational history and hope of immunotherapy of canine tumors, right? Sounds intense.
It is. But that's why we're here, to break it down.
Love it. So, no one's debating that canine cancer research is important, but let's get specific. This review jumps right into non-specific immunostimulants, and LMTPPC is the star of the show, at least at the beginning. What's the deal with this molecule? What makes it so powerful, especially for something like canine osteosarcoma?
Okay, so LMTPP, right, it's synthetic. Basically, it's a liposome-encapsulated muranyl tripeptide phosphatidylethanolamine. A mouthful, I know.
Definitely not trip it off the tongue. But it's designed to activate the immune system.
Exactly. Think of it like this. It targets those monocyte and macrophage lineage cells, the ones that are supposed to be wiping out threats. LMTPPE gives them a nudge, pushes them into that cytotoxic state, primed and ready to attack tumor cells.
So like giving those immune cells a serious energy drink, get them fired up and ready to fight.
Exactly. And the data backs it up, especially in canine osteosarcoma, or CSA, as you'll see it shortened to a lot. Table 1 in the review is amazing. They had this study where dogs with osteosarcoma got LMTPPE after surgery, and the survival times, night and day.
Okay, hold on. I need the numbers.
Yeah.
We're talking a significant difference in how long these dogs live.
Significant is an understatement. Median survival time for the dogs who got LMTPPC, 222 days, almost 3 times longer. The control group, only 77 days. It's huge.
3 times longer. That's remarkable.
It is. And here's the best part. This wasn't just some fluke in a lab. This success with dogs. It launched LMTPPC into human clinical trials. Thanks to our canine companions, it's actually approved for chemoimmunotherapy in parts of the world now.
Talk about translational power. But let's pivot for a sec. Vaccine strategies. Now, when I think vaccines, I think prevention, right? Not treatment. How does that work with cancer?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? But the idea is to train the immune system to target existing cancer cells. Think of it like showing the immune system a most wanted poster, so they know exactly who to go after.
So instead of sniffing out bad guys, they're trained on those cancer cells. I like it.
That's the idea. And there are a couple of big players here. Autologous vaccines, where you use the dog's own tumor cells, and allogeneic vaccines, which use cells from a donor dog with the same cancer.
Personalized medicine for pups. Sounds like each approach has its pros and cons.
Totally. Autologous is super specific, tailored to each patient, but it takes more resources. Allogeneic is more off-the-shelf, ready to go, and often more budget-friendly, which we know is important for owners.
Definitely. So where have we seen success with these? Any specific cancers they've been effective against?
Oh, definitely. Autologous vaccines have shown a lot of promise for canine meningiomas, and B-cell lymphoma, too.
Okay, that's amazing. But tell me, are there any other cool vaccine developments, anything new and exciting?
There are. DNA and peptide vaccines are generating a lot of buzz right now. They're cheap to produce, relatively speaking, and easy to get a hold of, which is always a plus in our world. And we're seeing good results, especially with canine melanoma and, wouldn't you know it, osteosarcoma.
Osteosarcoma is like the recurring guest star of this review.
Right. It's such a common cancer in dogs, so it's a major target for all these new therapies we're talking about.
Makes sense. But I'm guessing, like with anything new, there are challenges with vaccine therapies, right?
Oh, for sure. We haven't figured out how to get that super robust, long-lasting immune response in every single patient. Not yet, at least. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
That's always the challenge, isn't it? That balance between effectiveness and consistency, especially with something as complex as the immune system.
Absolutely. But the good news is there are tons of researchers out there working their tails off to come up with even better vaccine strategies. It's a very hot area of research, but we can circle back to that. For now, let's talk about something that's revolutionized human cancer treatment and is showing serious promise in veterinary medicine immune checkpoint inhibitors.
Ooh, okay, this is where I geek out a little. I've heard so much about these checkpoint inhibitors, but I'll admit I'm still trying to wrap my head around how they work and what they mean for oncology.
Right. They're huge.
So break it down for me. What are these checkpoint inhibitors and why are they such a big deal?
Okay, imagine immune checkpoints as like brakes on the immune system. They're there for a reason, right? They keep the immune response in check so it doesn't go overboard and start attacking healthy cells. What immune checkpoint inhibitors do is, well, they inhibit those checkpoints. Basically, they take the brakes off, So the immune system can really go after those cancer cells.
So like unleashing the hounds, but the hounds are our own immune cells.
Exactly. And in human oncology, it's been game-changing. Some cancers that used to be incredibly difficult to treat are seeing amazing responses with checkpoint inhibitors. And now we're seeing those same inhibitors showing promise in dogs, too.
No way. Wait, so are we talking about the same drugs that are used in humans? Like literally the same stuff?
The exact same. And the early clinical trials, promising. Especially in canine melanoma, we're seeing real responses, but of course, just like any therapy, there's always a chance of side effects. We got to be mindful of that.
Of course, it's always a balancing act, right? Weighing the benefits with any potential downsides.
You got it. And we're still early in the game with checkpoint inhibitors in dogs. We're still learning about the long-term effects and how to use them most effectively. But the potential is huge. Really, really exciting stuff.
It's like we're on the edge of a whole new world in veterinary oncology. But if we're talking the edge, we got to talk about cellular therapies, right?
Yeah.
This is where it gets really futuristic.
Right. It's like something out of science fiction. We're talking about engineering cells specifically, immune cells to become these little assassins that target and destroy cancer cells.
Okay, that sounds amazing, but also a little intimidating. Like, how does that even work in the real world?
Yeah.
In a clinic with a patient?
Well, one of the earlier examples was a cell line called TAL-104. It's a cytotoxic T-cell line that they use to treat all sorts of canine cancers.
Okay, I'm following. But what made TAL-104 so special?
This is the cool part. Its activity wasn't restricted by the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC. It was like a universal donor, able to go after cancer cells no matter what the dog's MHC type was.
Whoa, like a universal blood type, but for cellular therapies? That's pretty incredible.
It was a huge step forward. But we've moved on to even more targeted, more sophisticated therapies since then. Think Star Wars, going from X-Wings to TIE fighters.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. Hit me with these next-gen therapies.
Picture this. We take a patient's own T cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
We harvest them, take them out for a bit.
So it's like they're going to have to train for a while.
Exactly. We activate them outside the body, power them up, make them into these super cancer fighters, and then we reinfuse them back into the patient.
Like sending in the special forces.
That's a great way to put it. And this whole process, it's called activated autologous T-cell therapy. And it's showing some really exciting results in dogs, especially with canine osteosarcoma, no surprise there, and lymphoma too.
I bet. Any remarkable cases come to mind? Any, like, jaw-dropping success stories?
Oh, absolutely. One that really highlights how powerful this approach can be is a therapy called ECI-OSA-ZO4. They combine a vaccine with those activated T cells. So you're hitting the cancer with a double whammy.
Sounds pretty intense. How well does it work?
You're talking long-term survival in a lot of dogs with osteosarcoma, and this wasn't some, like, small under-the-radar study. It got the FDA's attention. Based on that data from dogs, the FDA actually gave the green light for human glioblastoma trials using that same approach.
Wow, that's incredible. It really speaks volumes about the power of canine research. Okay, but we can't talk about cellular therapies without talking about CAR-T.
Right.
This is like the big leagues of immunotherapy.
It is. CAR-T therapy is where we take those T cells we've been talking about and genetically engineer them to express what we call a chimeric antigen receptor, or chimera.
Chimeric antigen receptor. Got it. But, like, in English, please.
Think of it as giving those T cells a homing device, a GPS that guides them directly to the cancer cells. They're locked on and ready to attack.
Like a guided missile, but for cancer.
Exactly. And the results, they've been pretty amazing, especially for certain types of blood cancers. We're actually seeing the first commercially available CAR-T therapies now, which is huge. This is a whole new era in cancer treatment.
It's mind-blowing. What about CAR-T in dogs, though? Are we seeing those same leaps forward in veterinary medicine?
We are, although it's still very much early days. There's a ton of research going on right now, engineering CAR-RT specifically for canine cancers. The potential is massive, but there are definitely challenges too. Safety and efficacy are always top of mind, of course.
Right. We don't want to just throw these powerful tools at the problem without making sure they're safe and effective.
Absolutely. That's why this research is so important.
It's all about being responsible with these powerful new therapies. Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on Life Engine Laboratories. I've heard their name popping up in the CAR-T world, and it sounds like they're doing some really interesting work.
Oh, they are. They're all about making CAR-T even safer and more effective. They're targeting CD20, which is a protein you find on a lot of B-cell lymphoma cells.
CD20, okay, got it. What's so special about that?
Here's where it gets cool. They've got this technique to inactivate a molecule called BD2 microglobulin.
Beta-2 microglobulin, right. Okay, you're losing me a little bit. Break that down for me.
By inactivating BD2 microglobulin, they basically mask those CAR T cells from the patient's immune system. It's like giving them a disguise so the body's own defenses don't attack those engineered cells.
Whoa, that's pretty slick. So less risk of rejection.
Exactly. It's all about making those CAR T cells more stealthy. Figure 3 in the review actually shows this whole process, how they use this technique, which they call dual gene weld, to create these safer, more effective CAR T cells. It's wild.
Old gene weld.
Yeah.
It sounds like something out of a comic book.
Right. It's pretty incredible stuff.
I bet, and I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to their work.
Oh, definitely. There's so much more to uncover. But we'll save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
I'm already hooked.
You know, we often think about radiation therapy like it's this blunt instrument, just blasting the tumor with as much as we can.
Right, like carpet bombing.
Exactly. But it's so much more nuanced than that, especially now that we're starting to really understand how radiation interacts with the immune system.
Okay, see, that's what I love about these deep dives. There's always something new to learn. So spill it. Radiation and the immune system. What's the connection?
So it's not just about directly killing those cancer cells with the radiation itself. It's about how radiation can actually prime the immune system, make it a more formidable opponent against those cancer cells.
So it's like radiation is ringing the alarm bells, telling the immune system, hey, there's a problem here.
You got it. It's like sending up a flare, getting the immune system locked onto that tumor, although...
There's always an although, isn't there?
Right. It would be too easy if it were that simple. Radiation can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, as good as it is at stimulating the immune system, it can also suppress it, which is obviously not what we want when we're talking about immunotherapy.
Yikes, that's a bummer. So it's like this balancing act, right? Trying to find that sweet spot where you're maximizing the immune-boosting effects without sending the immune system into hiding.
Exactly. And that's where all this cutting-edge research comes in. Researchers are exploring all these new radiation techniques, but they're designed with the immune system in mind. One that's really interesting is called spatially fractionated radiation therapy, or SORT.
SOT. Okay, that one's new to me. Break it down for me. What makes it different from, like, traditional radiation?
Okay, so traditional radiation, you're basically trying to hit the entire tumor with a uniform dose of radiation. With SORT, we're switching it up. We're creating what's called a heterogeneous dose distribution.
Heterogeneous, meaning?
Meaning some parts of the tumor are going to get a higher dose than others. We're not just blasting the whole thing with the same intensity.
Okay, now my brain's doing backflips. Why wouldn't we want to hit the whole tumor with the same dose? Isn't that the goal?
It seems counterintuitive, right? But here's the thing. By creating those high-dose regions within the tumor, we're actually triggering a more potent immune response. It's like shining a spotlight on those areas for the immune system.
So it's not just about the radiation killing those cells directly. It's about getting the immune system fired up to join the fight, too.
Bingo! Those high-dose regions, they're like little in situ vaccines. When those cells in those high-dose regions die, they release all these danger signals, and that pulls the immune system in, like, hey, over here, we've got a problem. And that can actually lead to a systemic anti-tumor response, which is what we want.
That's so cool. But hold on, those high-dose regions, doesn't that increase the risk of side effects? I mean, if you're hitting those areas harder...
That's a really good point, and that's where the fractionated part of SFORT comes in. Instead of giving one massive dose, we're breaking it up into smaller doses delivered over time.
So smaller bites, but spread out strategically.
You got it. And that actually helps minimize the damage to healthy tissue while still getting those really important immune-stimulating effects.
Okay, so it's like we're being more strategic with how we deliver the radiation.
Exactly. Now, there are a couple of different ways to do this SO4T thing. GRID therapy and lattice radiation therapy are two big ones.
GRID therapy, lattice therapy, so many therapies. Okay, give me the difference.
All right, so picture this. With GRID therapy, we're delivering the radiation in this, like, grid pattern,
Yeah.
high-dose beams, but spaced out so we're sparing the healthy tissue between them. It's all about precision.
Like a laser grid. but for cancer treatment.
Exactly. Now, lattice therapy is similar, but instead of a grid, we're putting those high-dose regions in more of a 3D lattice within a larger low-dose volume. Imagine it like a web of radiation strategically woven throughout the tumor.
Okay, yeah, I can picture that. But these are more than just fancy delivery methods, right? Are we actually seeing evidence that these SORT techniques are better at activating the immune system?
We are. There was this one study they mentioned in the review. They looked at dogs with soft tissue sarcomas, and they compared lattice SBRT, which is a type of SOR diet, to conventional radiation therapy. The dogs who got the lattice therapy, they had significant upregulation of genes involved in those key immune pathways.
So we're talking about actual changes at the genetic level. That's really cool. But what about that whole double-edged sword thing? How do we make sure that we're tipping the scales toward immune activation and not suppression when we use radiation?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's one of the reasons why we often turn to combination therapies.
Okay, like using radiation with something else.
Right. It's all about synergy. For example, there's some promising research on combining radiation therapy with things like OX40 agonists.
OX40 agonists. Remind me what those are again?
So OX40 is a protein found on T cells, right? And OX40 agonists, they're like little booster rockets. They make those T cells even more powerful at fighting cancer.
Like giving those special forces we talked about even better weapons.
Exactly. And when you combine those agonists with radiation, look out. Some studies have shown that this combo can actually reduce regulatory T cells.
Regulatory T cells, those are.
The ones that try to calm the immune response down. We don't want that. We want the immune system fired up and ready to fight.
Got it. So it's like we're cutting the brakes and hitting the gas at the same time. This is incredible. But we're running a little short on time for this part of the deep dive. What's next on our immunotherapy adventure?
Let's switch gears and talk about how we make sure we're using all of these amazing therapies in the best way possible. That's where immunomonitoring comes in.
Immunomonitoring. Okay, that sounds important, but I'm not going to lie, a little intimidating too. What's involved in that?
Basically, it's all about understanding how a dog's immune system responds to these immunotherapy treatments.
So we're watching to see if it's actually working the way we want it to.
Exactly. And not just if it's working, but are there any side effects? Do we need to tweak the treatment plan as we go? It's about being proactive.
Makes sense. You wouldn't just give a drug and then never check to see what happens, right?
Yeah.
So how do we actually do this immunomonitoring? What does it look like in the clinic?
Well, that's where all these fancy tools come in. Flow cytometry, for example. It lets us look at different immune cells in blood or tissue samples. We can see how many T cells there are, B cells, NK cells, all the heavy hitters. And we can see if they're activated, ready to fight.
So we can see how riled up the immune system is.
Exactly. But we can go even deeper. RNA sequencing, this is where it gets really cool. We can actually analyze the gene expression patterns within those immune cells.
Gene expression. Okay, now you go full-on science nerd on me.
It sounds complicated, but basically we're seeing which genes are turned on and off within those cells. It's like reading their minds. Tells us a lot about how they're functioning, how they're feeling, if you will, and how they're reacting to the tumor and the treatment.
Okay, I kind of get it. So more information is always better, right?
Right. And the more we understand about a dog's immune system, the better we can personalize those treatments. It's all about finding what works best for that individual patient.
Love it. Now, I've heard of nanostring analysis. What's that all about?
Another great tool. With nanostring, we can look at the expression of tons of genes all at the same time, and we only need a tiny tissue sample.
Efficient. So we can get a really good overview of what's happening in the tumor.
You got it. It's like getting a panoramic view of the whole immune landscape instead of just seeing little pieces.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. This is a lot to process. But it seems like we're talking about a whole new level of understanding when it comes to the immune system.
We are. It's a rapidly evolving field, and it has the potential to completely change how we treat cancer in dogs. And it's not just about having all these new therapies, it's about knowing when and how to use them. That's where all this immunomonitoring comes in.
It's like we're not just treating the cancer anymore, we're treating the whole patient, their unique immune system too.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so exciting.
It absolutely is. This review has been amazing. We've covered so much ground. But one thing's for sure, canine clinical trials, they're more important than ever, right?
Absolutely. Dogs are paving the way for so many breakthroughs in cancer immunotherapy, not just for themselves, but for humans too. It's incredible.
It really is. Okay, so before we wrap up completely, any final thoughts on the review that our listeners should keep in mind?
You know, it's amazing how far we've come in such a short time. But we still have a lot to learn. We've got to stay curious, ask questions, and work together. This is bigger than any one of us.
So well said. This review was jam-packed. Cutting-edge research, incredible potential. I'm walking away feeling so hopeful for the future of canine cancer treatment. And as always, from Vet NeuroJar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.